All right, so what we're gonna make today is we're going to start our kaleidoscope. Well, before we get started with the design of the kaleidoscope, which hopefully we've already got an idea, or I've had you guys thinking about ideas, and we've got some sketches, we've got some reference images printed off. We'll get back to that. What we need to do first is get our paper prepped. So to prep our paper for this particular project, for what we're going to be doing today, if you're watching this at home and you are not a part of my class, then don't necessarily listen to the size of paper, because you can do this in any size of paper you want. But we're using an 18 by 18 sheet of paper. So 18 inches by 18 inches. And we're going to shave off 1/2 inch all the way around, which is going to give us a 17 by 17. So the first thing that we need to do is use our ruler, put it on the edge. And since my ruler is 15 inches, most rulers are 12 inches. Some are 24 inches, 18 inches. So it just depends on what size ruler you have. Since we have a 15-inch ruler and it doesn't reach the end, we're going to go over and make our 1/2 inch mark. So 1/2 inch from the side. Don't use the edge of the ruler if there's a mark for the 0. Put the 0 on the edge of the paper. Make 3 lines, because 15 doesn't reach all the way down to 18. So we're going to make 3 lines, 3 little marks on the edge of the paper, and then we're going to connect 2 of those together. I'm not trying to hit all 3, I'm just trying to hit 2. Line these up, make sure that you are good to go before you commit, and take that down as far as you can. And then line up the second and the third, and pay attention to how straight you are with the line that you've already drawn as well. So if that's on point, continue that line all the way down. Now you've got a 1/2 inch border on that side. So we need to do 1/2 inch on every side now. So however you can make that work on your space, your desk, whatever it is that you're working on, table, make sure you've got, I'd probably say at least a 20 by 20 space to work in, so your paper doesn't get crinkled. We're using a thinner weight paper on this, or we're using a thinner paper on this. So be careful with moving it around, shifting it will crinkle and wrinkle a lot easier if you're using a thin paper. If you're using a thicker paper, you don't have as much to worry about. If I start going too fast on any of this, and you need to pause it, pause this video so you can catch up, okay? Just as if I were instructing in class, I would pause myself, my instruction, make sure we're caught up, and then get started again. Not everybody works at the same pace, so make sure you pace yourself, follow the instructions, rewind it if you need to, and then proceed. You have to take your time on this. If you don't take your time on this, your line's going to be all wonky. It's not going to look right. When we get to the portion of the actual important part about putting our image on here and repeating it, if your lines are off, if your border's off, if any other lines are off, your image is not going to come out right. We want to make sure that we take our time. There's no reason to rush. We're not going anywhere. All right, so for this paper, we need to get basically we're gonna go for kind of a pizza slice, and there's 2 different styles that we can do here. we can make our kaleidoscope have a round border inside of our square border, and it'll look like a pizza. Or we can keep it square, and we'll get to why that's going to be important in just a minute. So we've got two different options. But the first thing we got to do is we got to put a line down the middle, horizontally and vertically. Since my paper is 18 inches, what I'm going to do is put my line on the 0, find my 9, because that's half of 18, and I'm going to do the same thing like I was doing with the 1/2 inch. I'm going to make a mark 3 times. Make sure you're not doing it off the border. We're doing it off the outside of the paper. 3 marks. If you notice how long I'm taking, just make sure you take your time. Never hurts to go slow when you're doing something, especially when you're doing something for the first time. Really go slow. There, a straight line. Turn my paper, do another 9 inches. So 9. 9. Okay, so now we've got our 4 squares, but we need to have 8. So we're going to line up the middle of the paper with the outer edge. And if we drew our border right, it should be cutting straight through from the edge to the middle. Since my ruler's not long enough, we got to do one at a time. Okay. And we line that up again, the outside edge. Really make sure you got both ends lined up, ready to go before you commit to drawing the line. Okay, that looks pretty straight. Turn it, do the same thing on this side. So line it up. If these are not straight, and we proceed to the next step after this, we're going to have difficulties. And our image is not going to work out right. Okay, so we've got our square pizza right now. From our square pizza, we've got a couple options. 1, we can leave it square. 2, we can use a compass and we can draw a nice circle around this. So you have a choice. And I'm going to explain the differences here, how this is going to work. So I can make a circle. So I want to put my compass down, my point of my compass down in the middle. I want to make sure this is hitting the edge of my border. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw a circle, whether I use it or not. But this is, if you are drawing a circle, follow this step. If you're not drawing a circle, don't worry about this step. So I'm going to extend this out just far enough where I can hit the border. I don't want to go outside the border. And I went outside. So sometimes that'll happen if you're pushing down. Sometimes it'll happen if we're not really in the middle of our paper. The easiest way to do this with the compass is to put your pressure down in the middle on the compass, lightly touch the pencil to the paper, and then rotate your paper. So if you've got enough room, we can simply turn it like this, and it'll work out just fine. Okay? What this tells me over here is that my 1/2 inch mark was off somehow, or my pencil pushed down too hard and it got bent out of shape and we're outside. But that's not that big a deal. This looks pretty good otherwise. And you got to make sure you have a long enough pencil when you're stretching a long sheet of paper. These short little pencils aren't going to work if you're doing a bigger circle. So the compass is done. So here's how this is going to work from here. Okay. Next thing that you need is a piece of tracing paper. Okay. We don't want to fold this paper, the big one, right? We want to draw our image and then we want to put the tracing paper down. Okay. So you're going to get one sheet of tracing paper and you got to make it work. Okay. Sometimes you can make it, you can stretch it just in case. You can leave room if you do it just right. Like you can, what I do is make a mark here, make a mark here. So I know that's the top. Make a mark here, stretch this out, and then make a mark here, there. So I've got my pizza slice. So if I mess up on this or it gets ruined, I've still got this much paper, I can do another one. It's no big deal. So don't put this right in the middle, because if you need to reuse this tracing paper, you have to get another one, and this stuff's not the cheapest. So use your paper wisely, use a portion of it. That way you've got another portion free just in case. It's not required, but it's just in case a mistake happens. Okay, tracing paper is gonna come in handy in just a moment. So we need to draw an image. So our kaleidoscope is you're gonna do one of two things. It's gonna be difficult for me to show you both in one shot, one type video. I'd have to do this 2 times, 2 different times to show you how this is gonna work. So what we can do is we can draw an image on here, trace it on our tracing paper, and then we can simply slide it over to the next and redraw it here and slide it. So this is the slide method. So you're sliding each slice over. We're not flipping it, we're sliding it. The other option is to trace it on the tracing paper and then flip it over and line it up. Okay, so there's 2 reasons, 1 reason for each. So if I want to draw half of something here, let's just forgive my drawing, this is not going to be really refined. Let's say we've got some sort of an animal here, right? And we've got half the face. So I've got half the face going on this side. If I trace half the face, well, let's go ahead and trace it. Okay, get it lined up. I've got my 3 corners lined up. I'm going to trace this like that. Okay, if I slide this, I'm gonna get another half a face over here, and then another half a face over here, and another half a face over here. So I'm never gonna get a full face if I slide it, okay? So if something is half, if you did half of something and you slide it, you're always gonna have a half, and you're gonna have 8 halves, okay? If we take this image we just traced and we flip it, okay, we line up our corners, get our 3 corners lined up. And once we're good, you can see that they meet where they need to meet. Okay, and then what we do is what has to happen, so this is another part of the step. So we've got to make sure we have the right pencil. So we need either a 4 or a 6B. So if I have a 6B, there's a softer lead and it's darker. So what I want to do is, from now on, what I want to do is I'm going to draw this in a 6B, and you can already see it's getting darker and it's thicker. So I've got a 6B, and what's gonna happen on the other side, when I flip it over and line it up, and then I draw on it again, okay? So now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to trace right over that line that I just made on the other side. Make sure we hit that line that we drew on the other side. And this just has to be rough. We don't need it to be really dark on the actual paper. See how light that is? That's what we want, a nice light outline. Okay, so now I've got a full face. So then I'm gonna go to the next one and I'm gonna lay it back down the right way, the first way that I had it, right? So I'm gonna line it up. Make sure my 3 corners are good. If your corners don't line up, then you did something wrong. This again is 6B. So I've got 6B on both sides of my tracing paper now. So every time I draw on the other side, I'm gonna get an imprint. So I've got my imprint. I'm gonna flip the paper over again. Line up my corners. And go through, and this again doesn't have to be super detailed. The detail is gonna come when we actually go through and add color or shading, whatever it is that we're doing. In my student's case, we're adding color. And see, that's what we do. We just keep going around and around. The requirements for my students are they have to have an image, and then they have to fill in the background with something too. So we can't just have a face and white space in the negative, okay? So for this particular thing, I mean, I could have claw marks up here, but again, you're focusing, your image that you want to focus on is just in this square here, or this pie slice here. Everything else is going to duplicate when you flip it, or if you turn it. So again, if I were to just do this and then turn it and not flip it, so slide it, not flip it, I would just have 8 halves of faces instead of 4 full faces going around. So we need to have a background. And again, whatever you draw here and you trace is gonna flip over or slide and be here and be here. It's gonna go all the way through, okay? After we've got everything traced out and done, tracing paper is no longer necessary, and we can go through and start adding the details. Now, in this case, this is kind of a silhouette. There's no eyes, there's no mouth, no nose, whiskers, things like that. So I need you to make sure that this first drawing is exactly what you want and fully drawn, because I only want you to draw it once. The other time that you draw it is going to be tracing it, flipping it, or sliding it and tracing it, tracing it, tracing it. So this image has to be good, ready to go before you move on to tracing it on the tracing paper. So back to the circle. So I did the circle. Let's say I don't do the circle. I still do the face here, but I don't do the circle. You have to flip this to this. You cannot slide your image when you're doing the square. Reason being is this point out here, if we slide it to match up with this, so this would end up being over here, but this point would end up being way up here, way off. So you can't slide when you're doing the square. You have to flip it or flip it this way, okay? So let's put this back on here. So this is my original. So I can't slide it if it's in the square form, non-circle, just square. It has to flip over. Now, if you look, I'm gonna make the marks. So forget that I made the marks for the circle. I'm gonna say, see now in this case, this is off. So I'm gonna have to use more of the paper to get the top and the bottom in. So you guys see that? So I have to make a mark here. I have to make a mark here. And I have to make a mark way out here. That's my new triangle. And then I would draw the face, right? And then I would have to flip over and make sure this mark is right out here. Make sure everything's lined up. And I have to flip. Okay, so again, my new face is still over here. Forget this one. This is my old one. My new one does line up and it works fine. So if you're doing the square, you've got to use more of the paper, and you could probably still split it. So if we did it down here, we could get it in here, and then we'd still have this half of the paper if we needed to do a secondary one if we screwed up or it got too dark. So that's how we're going to start our kaleidoscope. Okay, that's how we're going to get all this image filled in, so that way we can start adding the color, whether it be paint, whether it be colored pencils, crayons, whatever medium that you're going to use. In our case, for my students, we're going to use colored pencils. We're going to blend. We're going to use all of our shading techniques that we learned over the year. We're going to make sure that we make this a nice full image, and we use reference photos. So we need to have those available so we pay attention to the way things move and the way things look, the lines that don't exist, so on and so forth. So our paper is mapped out. We're good to go. You know the tracing technique with the tracing paper, and all you need is one sheet of tracing paper, and you can make this come to life. Thank you very much.